Welcome back everyone to the Metroidvania Guru's Ultimate Metroidvania Tier List. This is episode 5. We're going to add a few more games today. And if you've been keeping up, then you know exactly what those games are. And there's a couple of really big ones in here, probably the biggest. So this is going to be pretty exciting. And it was really weird that the randomized picker that I use actually picked both of these games one after the other. And of course I'm talking about Super Metroid and Castlevania Symphony of the Night. These games are considered to be basically the templates for all Metroidvanias, so it's going to be kind of awesome to actually sit down and talk about both of them in one video. But before I get into them, I want to take a look at Iconoclasts, but even before I get into that, I want to make a quick amendment. As I look at my tier list, sometimes I take a look at things and I reevaluate them, and I think, should that game be where it is right now? And I stare at it and I look at it, and eventually I'm like, you know what? I think it should be moved. And in that case, I'm taking a look at Ender Lilies. Ender Lilies is probably my favorite Metroidvania ever. And because of that, I think it's kind of clouded my judgment a little bit. And so I really took a look at it and was like, okay, what are some things that it does really well? And what are some things that it doesn't do well enough when it comes to, you know, the basic things for Metroidvania? And so I sat and I really kind of evaluated it. And I've come to the decision that Ender Lilies really isn't an S-tier Metroidvania. It is very good and it's my favorite, but it doesn't do everything quite right. At least to be considered like, you know, the cream of the crop. And really the decision to like move it is because it doesn't do a very good job at the alternate ending. I like Ender Lilies' alternate endings. I think the endings themselves are great, but it's the path leading up to the ending C, the ultimate true ending. It just didn't work for me. I'm trying my best not to spoil anything, and I'll get to that here in a second about spoilers moving forward with these episodes. But yeah, without spoiling anything, when it comes to the true ultimate ending, the real true ending for Ender Lilies, I didn't like how you get this ability that is in the critical path. And then you're forced to backtrack and kind of find where you can use this ability, which typically is fine, but it really is just going and finding like locked doors and unlocking them and getting the thing. There's some variations, like sometimes you got to fight like something behind that door or whatever, but really it's just running around, unlocking doors, getting things. And it's not the most engaging. And because of that, I don't think Ender Lilies should be considered an S tier because it just kind of falls a little flat in that aspect. That true path, that creative logic and merging of like narrative and mechanics didn't really nail it for me. And because of that, I think we should take Ender Lilies down, and I'm going to put it as high A tier. I still think it's a little better than Astalon, only because Astalon's has this 100% map completion you need, which is complete garbage in my opinion. And I think Ender Lilies, even though it's not my favorite just to run back and unlock doors, it's a little better than 100%ing a map. Okay, now that we got that amendment out of the way, I want to talk about spoilers. I got some feedback about how when I'm doing these tier lists, I spoil things. And that's not what I intend to do with these tier lists. These tier lists are created for Metroidvania enthusiasts that have already played and beaten these games. And they're looking for an outlet to really kind of talk about these things in depth. However, I understand there are people that still want to engage and want to talk about these Metroidvanias through this tier list that I'm creating. And so to accommodate everybody, I think it's probably a good idea moving forward to create spoiler sections. So starting with this episode, I'm going to start tagging things as spoilers, and I'll put, I don't know what I'm going to do, but it's going to be something like, maybe I'll put something up on the screen saying, hey, here's spoilers, go to this time. You've seen people do that before, so I'll probably emulate something like that. So I guess what I want to say is don't worry about spoilers anymore. I will be talking about them, but I'll tag them appropriately so you can skip over some things. And so I want to thank everybody who's given me that feedback, because I want to make these videos, for you guys, right? And I want you guys to enjoy them. I want you to watch them, and I want them to be the best they could possibly be. And so when you guys provide me feedback like that, that's how I can always get better. Anyway, sorry about the long intro. I just wanted to get that amendment out of the way, and I wanted everyone to know about the spoilers section that we'll be doing moving forward, starting with this episode. Speaking of this episode, let's get started with this episode. First up, we have Iconoclasts. Okay, Iconoclasts. I've actually already done a video on Iconoclasts. I'll put a card up in the corner so you guys can take a look at that if you so choose. So I'll try not to spend way too much time on it, but you guys at this point know how much I talk. So no promises there. So just like any other game, I'm just going to go pros and cons, and then we'll go into a spoiler section. The first pro I want to talk about is the game's narrative, but I don't want to dive too deeply into it. Maybe I'll get into it a little bit with the spoiler section. I just want to kind of do like an overview of the narrative and why I think it's a pro. So I think I like the narrative because it is dark. It is a very, very dark story. And what makes it so cool to have this dark story is that it really clashes with the game's design and aesthetic. Like, if you were to look at Iconoclast, it looks like a retro game from like the Sega Genesis. It almost looks like a Sonic level. Like the first biome looks like it could be in a Sonic the Hedgehog game. But as you play, you'll find that this story is anything but cheery. You'll find theming around abuse of power, socioeconomic discrepancies, this kind of class divide that's created. They really go into this really interesting and odd critique on religion. And I don't know, I found it all to be really cool and interesting, and just the way that how dark it gets and how it just clashes with the cutesy art style. It's interesting. All right, so I'm risking hitting spoiler territory, so I'm going to move forward now. But I guess I really like the humor in this game. It doesn't always hit, but when it does, I appreciate it. It's not like super duper funny, but it's enough to make things light, especially when this dark story is going on in the background. And a lot of that humor comes from the characters. I really like the characters in this game. The main character, Robin, wasn't anything to write home about. She was just your basic silent protagonist, but the side characters were all really cool. Like there's Mina, and Mina is pretty reckless and she's hot-headed, but there's some pretty cool backstory to her, especially when it comes to like her family and then like the religion that her group of people worship. And then there's like probably my favorite character, Royal. Royal is this uppity magic user type person who's supposed to be like the messiah for the dominant religion, but like nobody takes him seriously, and he's just a goofball all around. And his character arc and his story is really interesting. Then you have Robin's brother, and I can't remember his name, but there's like this section with him, and again, I don't want to spoil anything, but let's just say that he moves very slowly in this section. It's a pretty cool section, narratively and mechanically. It's not the most fun, but you get what's going on and it works. And just overall, I really like the characters in this game. And there's a lot of funny stuff that happens. Thinking back to the humor. Like there's some weird enemy exchanges, like when you have to move these boxes so you don't blow things up. And then there's like this part where they're telling jokes and they're laughing, and then you have to move while they're laughing because it's like a stealth section, and like their laughter, it muffles your movement in the vents. Oh, and that brings me to the character Black. She was a fantastic character. And again, I don't want to spoil too much here, but like you're not supposed to like Black, and I don't think you even like her in the end, but you empathize with her. And I love it when a game takes a villain that is very villainous, humanizes her, and then makes you feel bad for her. I don't know, I just thought Black was really well done. All right, moving on from the humor and the characters, let's take a look at this presentation. Iconoclast's presentation, as you can see, is just outstanding. And it's incredible that apparently one person made this entire game. And the art style that he's created is really, really cool. And you'll see in like a lot of his like backgrounds and a lot of his like vegetation, you'll see it's very geometric, so to say. Like you look at the trees and they're like square, and you think, oh yeah, that's a really cool artistic design or artistic choice. And it is, but there's also a narrative reason why these trees look like that. Again, I'm trying not to spoil anything, but yeah, it's just kind of cool that the dev for this game created this interesting art style and then decided to be like, hey, you know what? This art style is here for a reason. It's not just me just trying to make something cool. And so though it looks really cool, there's also a reason behind a lot of things that are happening. So it's just, I don't know, big brain stuff if you ask me. But yeah, you take a look at this game and it should remind a lot of the old heads out there, such as myself, of Gunstar Heroes. It's bright, there's lots of explosions, there's gunplay going on. I mean, heck, even some of the characters are named after colors, just like in Gunstar Heroes. We got white and we have black. But yeah, the game, it's nice to look at. It's nice to listen to as well. I enjoyed the music. There wasn't a whole lot of tracks that I can really recall, other than like the very first biome, because it has this like really cool kind of like DJ scratch noise, which was kind of cool. It really reminded me of like Rystar from the Sega Genesis. A lot of the aesthetics in this game takes me back to the Genesis days, and to me that's a huge plus. But I also hear people say this game reminds them of Metal Slug, which is also an amazing compliment. So I guess just all around, Iconoclast is a very pretty game. And speaking of Metal Slug, I know a lot of people say that the bosses in this game remind them of bosses from Metal Slug. And I guess I could see it especially with some of the early bosses. But anyway, yeah, I liked the bosses in this game. Some of them were goofy, some of them were just big, but they're always pretty fun to fight. And there was usually like some sort of like strategic thing you had to do. Like each boss fight had a kind of a puzzly element to it. And even though I'm not the biggest fan of puzzle platformers, I do like bosses that require you to think a little bit. And again, I'm trying not to spoil anything, but there's this one boss. It's really, really fun to fight because it's like, not only are you fighting it as Robin, but then there are a bunch of other of these side characters that you've grown to like throughout the story that also are helping you during this fight. So it's all of you fighting this thing together, and I thought that was really awesome. And I think that brings us to the end of the pros. There are other things to like about this game, but I just thought those things that I highlighted in the pros just now, those are just the, again, the highlights, reasons why this game is great. Now, as we move to the cons, I think anyone who follows my content, they know that the number one thing that always irks me when it comes to Metroidvanias is when they're puzzle platformers. And I don't have anything against puzzle platformers. I really don't. They're not my favorite, but I absolutely do not like mixing puzzle platformers with Metroidvanias. When it comes to Metroidvanias, personally, I like to focus on exploration and combat. And Iconoclasts minimizes both combat and exploration in favor of puzzle platforming. And so if you like puzzle platforming, then Iconoclasts is probably going to be the game for you. Me, I just think puzzle platforming just takes away too much from what Metroidvanias should be. And so that's why anytime I see that, there's a emphasis on puzzle platforming, I'm just like, you know what, that's not the best. At least in terms of exploration, which comes as a double whammy for Iconoclasts because exploration in this game is super unrewarding. This game is very linear and it doesn't really require you to do a lot of backtracking. And if you do backtrack, there's not like a whole lot of things to do and get. If you do decide to explore, the rewards are just bad because most of the rewards are like crafting materials that you use to create these things called tweaks. And that brings me to my next con, tweaks. I hate the tweaks. Tweaks are this mechanic where it's like you equip these things and, imagine them like they're badges or their charms or whatever from like Hollow Knight, right? You put these tweaks on and they will give you something, it'll alter the game in some way. Maybe it'll give you a different jump or it'll, do something with cooldowns. I can't remember off the top of my head. And the reason I can't remember what these tweaks do is because they were so unimpactful. I never even cared about the tweaks. I don't even think I equipped them after I played for a little bit. And so when exploration was rewarded by giving you, whatever these crafting materials were to make more tweaks or to find recipes or crafting, blueprints for these tweaks, you were just like, thanks? I don't know. It just sucked. I never wanted these stupid tweaks. I didn't want to get any of the stupid crafts to make these stupid tweaks. And then that was basically what was rewarded through exploration. So yeah, tweaks, they were just a letdown all around. And there might be some people out there like, well, the tweaks really helped me beat the game, and that's great. I'm glad they did, but I pretty much beat the game with 0 tweaks. So take that for what that's worth. The next con I have is that I felt the game was rushed. I did like the game's story, and a lot of the mechanics in the game were fleshed out, especially when it came to like puzzling mechanics. But then there was this one weird section that required you to learn stealth from this NPC. And although I absolutely loved this character and I loved this section, it did a lot for world building and for just making the game just seem that much more real. This stealth section was never used outside of this one like little boss fight. It felt like they wanted to use this stealth mechanic throughout at least the new biome that you're sneaking into, but the game just kind of like drops it, and it was kind of frustrating. Frustrating in the sense that I wanted them to add this to the game because it would just be more content, but it seems like it got cut. And that's just unfortunate. There's also these purple clad characters added at the end. And these guys really bugged me because they were literally just created just to be roadblocks for this weird section coming up where you had to control different characters. So instead of creating villains that felt real and were really fleshed out, they threw out these brand new characters just so they could be roadblocks and die. Granted, some of the boss fights that come from these characters are pretty funny and good, but I think it was pretty obvious that it just felt rushed. And my final con for Iconoclasts before we get into the spoiler section is that I did not like the character's eyes. I know that sounds kind of nitpicky, but I didn't. Like, you take a look at Robin, who's the protagonist, right? You take a look at her profile in the game's key art and the box and everything like that, and she has these big round eyes. But then you take a look at her like in-game sprite, and they're like little like dots. And I don't know, it just bugged me. So I mean, I'm not going to ding the game because of that. But I would prefer her to not have those little soulless little dots as eyes. And now we come to the spoiler section of Iconoclasts. I think the first thing I want to talk about are the side quests in the game. There's like 2, and they require a whole bunch of backtracking. I didn't really like these side quests, essentially because they didn't fit into the game naturally. Backtracking wasn't something that you do in this game. And so to think that the player was going to backtrack at any point to find these side quests was just asking for this content to be skipped over. I know I missed them. So yeah, after I beat Iconoclasts, I went to YouTube and I looked up, did some research. Okay, what are some things that I might have missed during this game? And these side quests were like the number one thing I missed. And though these side quests do a lot for world building, they don't really do a lot for the player, in my opinion. Like, I think you unlock a double jump doing one of these, and there's at no point in the game when you really need a double jump. So yeah, initiating these side quests was kind of a pain, and then all the backtracking that one in particular had to do sounded painful as well. They did lead to 2 optional bosses, and they both looked really cool, really great designs. But combat is not this game's strong suit, so I wasn't like begging for more combat. That's why I was just like, yeah, I missed those, and I'm cool with missing those, whatever. And I guess the last spoiler bit I want to talk about is this game's ending. This game's ending is wild. I don't even know how to really explain it. I don't know, it's almost like Twilight Zone-esque, but it's more like Rick and Morty, I suppose, where it's just you find this thing, right? This space worm or whatever, and this is the god that the religions have been worshiping. And it turns out that this space worm is actually just a spaceship controlled by some like bird monster or bird alien. And the bird alien is just a trucker or something. It's a transport unit for this liquid substance that's a natural resource in the planet that you're on. And so the game, its theming is around like environmentalism, it seems, where it's just like, oh, we can't burn through our natural resources or else we're going to be screwed. And that's a lot of what's happening in this game. This natural resource has been burned through, and so a lot of the richer, higher class people are trying to build a rocket to then move somewhere else. But anyway, this trucker bird transport driver shows up and even has like dice in his mirror, which is just so funny. And it's just angry because you guys have like destroyed its fuel that it was supposed to transport. And so in just a few frames, all the characters in this game have been worshiping and fighting against and everything. It's all just shown as being something completely stupid. Like this hierarchy of individuals, this class divide, all of this is based off the fact they thought this transport ship was a god. And then their quote-unquote god comes down and is like, hey, you guys have like ruined everything. You've burned through all the fuel. What are we going to do about this, right? It's very weird, very silly, and super divisive. I've talked to some people who absolutely hate this ending. And I totally see why someone would hate it. Me, I loved it. I thought it was really, really interesting. I don't know. There's something about nihilism that really, really gets to me. I don't know if it's because I'm a messed up person or whatever, but this nihilistic ending was just fantastic. And again, I get why someone wouldn't like it, but I don't know, I just did. So with all that out of the way, where would I put Iconoclasts on this list? Let's see. Honestly, as much praise as I can give this game, because I do believe it's a very good game, I don't think it's a very good Metroidvania, so I don't think it should go very high on this list. And so I'm thinking, man, I don't know. I don't think anyone's going to like be too upset about this, but I'm thinking D. Yeah, I'm thinking right above Night Witch. Yeah, that seems good. And again, it's not that it's a bad game. I love this game. I thought it was really fantastic. But as a Metroidvania, it fails on a lot of fronts. You know, the exploration's bad. The rewards for exploring is bad. Backtracking is non-existent, and there are 2 optional things to backtrack for, and it's just bad. It's a puzzle platformer. Again, I don't like puzzle platforming and Metroidvanias coming together. This game just has a lot not going for it. And so yes, again, I'll reiterate, this is a very good video game. It is not a very good Metroidvania. And so that's why I give it a D. You know, it's a Metroidvania. It doesn't do anything in the genre exceptionally well, and it does some things in the genre pretty poorly, but it still is a Metroidvania, so I can't give it an F. So I think D is pretty good. I think it's better than the other ones underneath it, for certain. Next up is Super Metroid, the grandma of Metroidvanias. I'm not going to lie to you, I love this game, and I had a really hard time finding any cons for it. A lot of the cons that I came up with for Super Metroid really stem from the fact that I'm looking at it through a modern lens. And I'll dive deeper into that when we actually get to the cons for Super Metroid. But I want everyone to know that just because I'm looking at it through a modern lens doesn't make it a worse game. But I do have to account for its aging, I suppose. Because really that's what this Metroidvania tier list is all about. It's about taking a look at the genre holistically and seeing if certain games are worth prioritizing over others. We all only have so much time on this earth. Now, spoilers, and I'm not even going to put this in the spoiler section, but Super Metroid is a great, excellent game. But I just want to preface everything that I say about Super Metroid in that I'm taking a look at it through that modern lens, and I'm going to try to do my best not to calculate its influence for the genre. Just because it's one half of the template that's created this amazing genre we all love, I don't necessarily think that should give it a buy and send it straight to the S tier. Personally, I think we should look at this game through a modern lens and evaluate and critique it based off of all Metroidvanias. Anyway, sorry for that preamble. I just want to get all that out of the way that yes, I am taking a look at this through a modern lens and I'm not accounting for its legacy. This is the best way for me to try to be objective as I talk about Super Metroid, because the subjective side of me is like, yep, SS tier, let's get this over with, this is fantastic. But I really want to approach this as objectively as I can. And hopefully I've garnered enough goodwill from my viewers so that they trust me when I say that I'm trying to be as objective as possible. For instance, take a look at what I did to Ender Lilies at the beginning of this. I kept looking at that and I was like, is that really an S tier game? And I decided that it wasn't. I pushed it down a little bit. Will Ender Lilies go down more, or will other games go up more? I don't know. Sometimes I just look at this list and I'll decide and I'll figure things out. But anyway, I'm rambling. Here's my attempt at objectively trying to place Super Metroid on this list. One of my favorite video games of all time. Let's go. As I said in that long-winded preamble, this is a game that I absolutely love, and I could not find a whole lot of cons for it. A lot of the cons, again, are just because they lack stuff that modern Metroidvanias have. And when we get to cons, we'll dive a little deeper into that. But let's start with what makes this game great. So the pros of Super Metroid. The first thing I have here is its narrative/introduction. Super Metroid isn't a text-heavy game, so a lot of its narrative is really just actions throughout the game combined with environmental storytelling. And the introduction to Super Metroid, where it's just like, how's it go? It's like, the last Metroid is in captivity, right? Like, that's all good, but it's not really until we get into the space station that's getting attacked. That's when it gets really cool. We're diving directly into the action with the boss we have some history with. We essentially lose this battle. The boss gets away with the baby, the Metroid, and the space station's going to blow up. And so you got to escape before it blows up, right? Then you land on Zebes or Zebes or whatever, I call it Zebes, and your journey begins. And this is what I really like about Super Metroid's introduction. Not only do we have this really awesome first scene with the space station, but then you have this kind of like miniature journey you have within Zebes when you first get there, where you land with your gunship, you get off, you get to the surface of the planet, and then you start diving deeper into the planet, and it's just completely dead. There's not a single enemy in sight, and you're just kind of walking, drinking things in. The atmosphere is really getting built. Then you find the morph ball. That thing, like, I don't know, tracks you or looks at you or whatever the heck it does. And then the game begins. You go into these formerly empty biomes or these rooms, and now there are enemies there that are ready to kill you. The darkness is given away to light. You see these enemies, and then the music turns on, and it's just fantastic introduction. And that really brings me to the second pro that I have here about atmosphere. I'm not going to go too deeply into Super Metroid's atmosphere. We all know that the atmosphere in this game is just brilliant. And it all has to do with isolation, right? That feeling of isolation it gives you. I played Super Metroid when it was brand new and I was in elementary school. And when I first played it as a little kid, I absolutely felt alone. I had never felt anything like the way this game made me feel. And I played a lot of NES games. I did not play the original Metroid. That was a little bit before my time. I was like 2, maybe 3 years old when the original Metroid came out. But by the time Super Metroid came out, I was, old enough to at least, hold a controller and play it, right? Anyway, this feeling of isolation that Super Metroid creates is absolutely outstanding. Not only do you feel it in the environments, but you feel it in the music too. And the music is kind of part of the pros here, right? So we got this atmosphere of isolation and the way it's presented, right? The presentation of the game. And part of that presentation is its music. And the music is done so well in this game. And when I get to the spoilers section of Super Metroid, we'll get into how amazing this music is when it comes to recontextualizing the world, because I believe Super Metroid is the best at recontextualizing any world in Metroidvanias. Anyone can fight me in the comments on that one if you'd like, but man, we'll get to it in the spoiler section. But anyway, the way they use music to kind of build atmosphere and to create this feeling of isolation is absolutely excellent. There'll be moments when they just drop all music and you're just in silence. There'll be moments when it's just some ambient noises. There'll be moments when they have like this kind of like, I don't even know, like the spacey kind of beeps and bloops that you're accustomed to when it comes to 16-bit music, but they'll use these like sustains or whatever with their notes, and it just sounds really, really cool and creepy. So yeah, Super Metroid's atmosphere, the way it makes you feel isolated and how the music and the sounds are utilized to do that is really, really fantastic. The next pro I have here is hidden mechanics, and really I'm talking about the wall jump. Yeah, the wall jump. How that's something that you have always had throughout the game, but it isn't until like you find these animals doing it that you realize it can be done, unless you figure it out by accident, which I did. Like when I first played Super Metroid, I figured out the wall jump by accident, and it's like it took me forever to actually get the rhythm on how to truly do it. I did it by accident and was just like, what the crap? And with that, even at a young age, I was able to sequence break when I was down in that one biome, and you'll have to forgive me, I can't remember all the biome names. But it's that one biome where there's that huge drop. And this is a pretty significant part of the game, and we'll get to that, especially when it comes to the spoiler section. But you do this drop, right? And the way to get up from this drop is you have to find the freeze beam, freeze these enemies, and use them as platforms. But if you already know how to do the wall jump, you can actually get out of there much sooner. And we'll get the sequence breaking and all of that in the spoiler section. It's awesome. I think another hidden mechanic really is the the spark run or whatever. I can't remember the name of it, but it's like the shine spark maybe. It's where Samus runs and then you press down and then she's like shining, and then you can like go in any direction and you do like this you basically fly, right? And again, you learn this move from an animal. And I just thought it was so cool to have these hidden mechanics. You don't need them for the critical path, but they're super helpful if you can figure them out. I guess my next pro is the map design for Super Metroid. I just think it's so incredible. And I'm not specifically talking about the layout of the biomes or anything like that. I guess I'm more talking about how the world's openness is, I guess, opened up to the player. Super Metroid is incredibly linear in the beginning. Then there's this part in the game when it truly opens up. And this is something I'll dive into when we get to the spoiler section. But the way the devs really drip feed this world to the players, creating this sort of illusion of openness, but in actuality just guiding players along until they feel like the players are ready for that openness, I think was done very, very well. And again, you'll have to forgive me because it's been a while since I've played Super Metroid. I've probably played through this game like a dozen times. I really do love this game a lot. I'm kind of going off memory here, so I'm not going to remember every single room and every single biome's name, but I do recall these sections where you'll progress forward and then something will happen that basically cuts you off from backtracking. And I'll do my best to kind of throw these examples up on the screen, but it's that part where that gate comes down and you can't go back through unless you figure out how to loop around, which is like something you do much later, or you find that one laser that goes through walls, which is also a weapon that you find much later. But anyway, up to that point, you feel like things are pretty open. You're finding a lot of like dead ends because you're like, well, I don't have this move to get me over there yet, right? But it still feels very open. It's just, well, I have player agency. I find that I can't go forward there. Therefore, I'm going to turn around, right? Well, at this moment, you're basically getting told, you got to only move forward, and it is no longer player agency. I am blocking you, says the devs. And they do that again when you fall down that hole into that one biome, and I'll throw up a video of that happening. Because again, falling down that hole is another way for the devs to be like, okay, we want you to focus on finding and exploring this area, and we want to block you off from everything prior to this. That way it just keeps you engaged, keeps you focused. Because I get it, man. There are people that play Metroidvanias, and if the openness is too much, it just completely turns them off. Now, the most hardcore of Metroidvania enthusiasts, they love this. They love complete openness. But your casual player, they really don't. In fact, a Metroidvania that's too open turns a lot of people off. And I think I hear a lot of people talking about Hollow Knight, how it felt too open to them and there wasn't enough guidance and whatnot, and it just completely turned them off from Hollow Knight. Super Metroid mitigates this by actually blocking sections off to play, like prior sections, just completely blocking them off to players, helping them focus on what's ahead. And that's what I mean when I say incredible map design. Maybe I should say it's something else. It's incredible. I have no idea what else to call that. But the way they designed this map to drip feed and to really give you this kind of like false illusion of openness in the beginning, and then to finally open it up to people after they find like the freeze beam and reach the surface of Zebes again through another area, that was done just so very, very well. And I'll talk about that loop and all that in the spoiler section. I want to move on now to the bosses. The bosses in Super Metroid are really cool. I wouldn't say they're the greatest, and they're definitely not the most challenging, but they're all pretty memorable. Who doesn't remember seeing Kraid in Super Metroid? And who doesn't remember fighting that one monster? I can't remember its name, but it just like, you can like take your grapple hook or whatever, that grapple beam, and shoot it and then electrify it while it's holding you. I mean, that's cool. That's some cool stuff. Or how about that one boss that like you kill and then it like jump scares you with its skeleton after it's dead? Super Metroid knew how to make an entrance and knew how to make an exit when it came to its bosses. And just overall, I just thought they were really cool. I mean, especially Ridley. I mean, a space dragon, that's just fantastic. And man, that boss fight with Mother Brain, and we'll get to that in the spoiler section, but dude. Moving on, my final pro for Super Metroid, though there are much more I could talk about, but the final one I'm going to discuss is how rewarding Super Metroid's exploration is. And this is where it gets kind of tough for me to separate myself from the subjective Luke versus the objective Luke. Because this game helped forge my love and my understanding and everything that I needed to know about Metroidvanias. And so I take a look at past Luke playing this game and just have all those feelings and all those memories of just how exciting exploration and discovery was in this game. I had never played anything like it. And so just finding the way to get to the next biome and just seeing a new area, that blew my mind as a kid. Like, oh, I found the next level. Oh, that's what excited Luke sounds like apparently. And so doing my best to divorce myself from how I felt the first time I played this game versus how it holds up to its contemporaries, that's really hard for me. And so I did some soul searching. I did some really hardcore kind of like thinking on this. And I still believe that the exploration in Super Metroid is very rewarding. And the reason that's so tough for me to say is because I feel that modern day Metroid games, or at least the most recent ones, I feel their exploration is just very unrewarding. Like when I played Metroid Dread, I love that game. That is a very good game, but you're going to hear it here first, probably from me at least, because I don't know when I'm going to do a video on that one. But I felt Metroid Dread was a very bad Metroidvania. And it stems back to why I feel a lot of Metroids aren't really the greatest examples of the Metroidvania genre, which seems ironic and stupid, but just hear me out. And it really just comes down to, do I want to explore and find the things? And in most modern Metroid games, I don't. Like, I don't need another +5 missiles or another super bomb or whatever. A lot of the exploration, especially in Metroid Dread, it was just like, man, I do not want any more of these stupid missiles. And you see that in Fusion, and you see that all over the place in these, I guess, more modern Metroidvanias, even though Fusion's not modern. But anyway, all that being said, I took that into consideration and took a look at Super Metroid and everything that it had to offer for its exploration, and came to the conclusion that the exploration in Super Metroid is in fact very rewarding. And honestly, it's really tough for me to explain why. And I think it really has to go down with like maybe 2 or 3 factors. One, things in Super Metroid are hidden very well. Like, I remember that one E-Tank that's just in like a random like invisible block, like near the beginning of the game. You just shoot up and there it is. That's so stupid to put it there, but they did, and I love that they did. I guess modern video game sensibilities would dictate not to do that, which is ironic because when it comes to the cons that we're getting to shortly, I do deem the game for shirking a lot of modern sensibilities, but for some reason, I really liked this one. I really liked that they would hide stuff in very esoteric and weird ways. You don't see that a lot with a lot of modern Metroids, especially when it comes to the more contemporary ones nowadays, or at least the ones after Super Metroid, but I loved how stupidly they hid some of these things. And I guess another factor would have to be with this feeling of isolation, this atmosphere that's created with Super Metroid. I loved finding all this stuff and becoming basically a god. This game is so oppressive and it just has so many threats that finding all this stuff actually felt like I needed to find this stuff in order to survive. And I'll get into that in the spoilers when it comes into, all the stuff that you can find to become a god, essentially. But yeah, I don't know. It felt better in this game, the exploration, the rewards that you got for exploring. It felt much better in this game than it did in any other Metroid. And if anyone has anything to say about that or can help me better articulate it or wants to argue it, I'm willing to listen. But yeah, ultimately, I loved the exploration and the rewards in this game. Okay, finally, we get to the cons. And again, I'm not happy with the cons that I have, but I think they're worth considering when it comes to, placing them among the pantheon of all the other Metroidvanias in the world. So, looking at Super Metroid through a modern lens, this game has a few things missing. One, there's no fast travel. I guess it's not that big of a deal because this game isn't huge, but I love fast travel in Metroidvanias. And then 2, there are no alternate endings. Again, neither one of these things are like super terrible to not include in your Metroidvania, except maybe alternate endings, because I find those to be so rewarding for exploration. But again, considering that Super Metroid basically created a template for all Metroidvanias moving forward, I can see why it doesn't have these things. They just weren't thought of yet. So I'm not taking them into heavy consideration when it comes to placing Super Metroid on the tier list. So I guess my next con has to do with the zero guidance the game gives. Now I know this sounds weird because I talked about how the devs created scenarios that helped guide the player into Super Metroid's openness, but all that was done through level design. None of it was done narratively or in some undiegetic way, like an objective marker or somebody telling you where to go or something like that. Personally, I don't find this to be that big of a con because I love getting lost in Metroidvanias, and I especially don't like hand-holding. But I know there are people that would look at this and be like, man, I don't know where I'm going, I'm getting bored, blah, blah, blah. Like a casual Metroidvania player or somebody who's not really big into Metroidvanias. And so they would look at this lack of guidance and get frustrated very easily. And I think that could happen in Super Metroid, especially if you have to do backtracking. And I know when it comes to people that aren't huge into Metroidvanias, they typically hate backtracking, period. And the last con I have here is, I think, a legitimate con, is that there is this low narrative motivation and not a whole lot of stakes. Yes, the last Metroid has been stolen by a space pirate and they're going to use that last Metroid to create more Metroids. And Metroids are very, very dangerous to ecosystems, especially when they use these Metroids as a weapon. So yes, there are stakes, but it's easy to forget about these stakes as you're playing the game. I guess because they don't bring it up enough or at all, it's easy to forget everything that's going on while you're trying to figure out where to go. And so there's this real disconnect between the narrative and the mechanics. The mechanics being me actually playing the game. For instance, when I was a kid, I completely forgot what was happening in this game. I just knew I wanted to figure everything out and I just wanted to get to the end. And so essentially, the narrative and the stakes got lost in the sauce. How do you fix something like that? I don't really know, especially because this game wants you to feel isolated. So having somebody, say showing up and talking to Samus and telling her what's going on or what's at stake or something like that definitely wouldn't work. Could you find audio logs or could you find some documents or something like that? Maybe, but I don't know. That then takes away from the game and forces the player to read and stuff like that. And again, we were really young when this game came out, and I know I wouldn't want to stop and read all this crap. Again, I don't really know what the best solution is, but if they could somehow have made these stakes top of mind eventually or at certain points, I think that would have made this game, at least narratively, a little stronger. And now we've come to the spoiler section of Super Metroid. This game's like 30 years old or something. So it might seem a little silly to have a spoiler section, but you know, whatever, I'll do it. It's fine. I have a few points here I want to talk about. I'll try to get through them pretty quickly. One, I want to talk about that progression into godhood that Samus goes through. I don't know what it is about Samus in Super Metroid, but for some reason, I feel like she starts out like super duper weak, and then by the end of the game, she is just the strongest character in any video game ever. And maybe that's true, maybe that's not, but the thing is I feel it. The devs did a really good job at making me feel empowered. Because by the end of this game, Samus, she doesn't even look the same. Like, you find different suits that change how she looks, and then the color of her suit, right? And then she gets all this stuff, like a visor that lets her see secrets, and then she gets all these cool weapons, and then all the weapons stack onto each other, so they can, like, you know, you got your regular pew-pew weapon, which kind of sucks, but then you get, like, you know, the spazer, and then you can go through walls, and then you freeze stuff. Like, it's just a whole lot of fun to see how strong Samus gets in the end. I really don't think any other Metroidvania does it nearly as good as Super Metroid. Maybe someone can argue that maybe a later Metroid does it better, but I don't know. I think it has to do with a combination of like all the cool crap that she eventually gets, juxtaposed with how very oppressive and how very isolated you feel from the atmosphere of this game. To go from feeling weak to just being just absolutely like OP, it's an amazing feeling. Next up, we have sequence breaking. I kind of talked about that a little bit, especially when it comes to like, you know, pro players. These people that are very, very skilled, they'll find all kinds of goofy ways to sequence break this game. And it's always fun to watch. The next thing I want to talk about, I think is probably the most important, and that has to do with how Super Metroid recontextualizes its world to great effect. And so I'm going to do my best to kind of like describe what I mean by this. I talked about world recontextualization in one of my videos. I think it was Time Spinner. And in that, I talk about how the world in a Metroidvania should be treated like any other character in a story. And what I meant by that is that this world needs to grow. It needs to change. And if you can do that with the world in Metroidvania, it is just so amazing. And I think Super Metroid does this kind of recontextualization of the world the best. And it does it by actually not changing how the world looks. And I think that's what makes it so impressive. All right, so let's dive into it. Let's talk about the surface of Zebes. This is where your gunship is. This is where the game really starts. You get out of the gunship, you go to the left, you enter this biome. You do some exploring in that biome, then you go to another biome, I think Torian, right? Go through Torian, you go through Criteria, and then you end up in Brinestar. Then from Brinestar, you actually find an elevator that sends you back up to the surface, and then you go to the left and you loop back onto your gunship to the very beginning of the game. At this moment, when you find your gunship after getting out of Brinestar, this is where the genius of recontextualizing the world comes into play. Let's start from the beginning. You land. You're on Zebes' surface. The music doesn't exist. You hear rain. You see rain. It's thunderstorming. This gives you that initial feeling of dread, right? Then you move left. You go into Criteria or whatever, and your journey begins. During this journey, you're fighting stuff, you're finding things become more powerful, you're growing, you're being threatened, you're getting blocked off at these two main things that I talked about earlier, that gate and then that drop in the Brinestar. And you go through so much, lots of highs, lots of lows, but ultimately you feel alone. Then you find that elevator up to the surface and you come across your gunship. The atmosphere has changed. It's no longer raining. The music, more pleasant. And you see the gunship and you have this revelation. Not only that you've looped back, but you're somewhere you know, somewhere familiar, somewhere safe. This area has been recontextualized for you, and it feels absolutely gratifying. This is probably Super Metroid's strongest moment besides its ending, and we'll get to that here in a second. But that feeling you get when you finally return to your gunship, man, it cannot be equaled. It's such a cool moment of relief, and is a prime example of what I mean when a Metroidvania recontextualizes its world effectively. Anytime a Metroidvania can emulate this, that's a good sign. And then we're going to finish off on the last thing that I think is really fantastic when it comes to Super Metroid, and that's its final boss. You all probably know at this point, so I'll be brief. You fight Mother Brain, she starts kicking your ass, and then right when you think you're going to die, boom, that Metroid shows up out of nowhere, and you realize, oh, that's my Metroid. That's the one that thinks I'm its mom, and it's saving my life. Well, then this baby, this Metroid, ends up dying. And then Samus absorbs it into her, and she becomes this all-powerful being, or or whatever. Or she just gets like a supercharge of energy, who knows, something like that. And then you're able to absolutely trash Mother Brain with this newfound power. It's a really awesome sequence and a supremely satisfying way to finish up this story. This sequence just drags you through all the emotions, just all of them. And then it ends with the planet going to blow up and you got a timer against you and you got to run out. Not my favorite way to end things, but it is what it is. All in all, a fantastic way to end a fantastic game. And with all that being said, where would I put Super Metroid on the definitive Metroidvania list? Again, it's tough to separate subjective Luke and objective Luke. If I had my druthers, I'd go ahead and put it in SS tier because this game is so very special to me and I love it so much. But looking at it through a modern lens and not accounting for Super Metroid's legacy, I still think this game should rank pretty dang high. But where? Let's see. So if I take Super Metroid, I'm not going to put it in B. I'm just dropping it there for a second. Yeah, it's higher than B. No doubt. Yeah, this is really tough. This is tough. Man. I think I'm going to put an A. And I'm going to put it under Astalon. I think that might be surprising for some people, but I swear I'm not trying to be an edgelord here. A is still a really good ranking, but I don't think I could give it S tier because it just doesn't hold up to a lot of the more modern Metroidvanias. Yeah, there's no fast travel and there's not a whole lot of narrative here, but it's still really fun to play. I just think there are just a very select few of Metroidvanias that do what Super Metroid did just a little bit better. Now, when it comes to atmosphere, Super Metroid has that on lock, and the presentation is still really great to this day. It's held up wonderfully. But I just find other Metroidvanias to be a little bit more rewarding with their exploration, with their narrative, with other aspects that I feel are very valuable in the Metroidvania space. So I guess what I'm saying is don't hate me too much for not putting Super Metroid in the S tier. I think to get up there, you really got to nail your narrative. You really got to nail the creative logic when it comes to finding an alternate path or an alternate ending. Your combat's got to be freaking fantastic. There's just so much that goes into making an S tier Metroidvania, and I don't think Super Metroid lives up to that, especially under a contemporary lens or a modern lens. Still, it's a fantastic game, one of my favorites of all time. I've played it dozens of times, and A rank, that's still really good. I hope you all are cool with that. And last but certainly not least, we have Symphony of the Night. Just like Super Metroid, Castlevania Symphony of the Night is one of those games that's going to be really hard for me to separate subjective Luke and objective Luke. Symphony of the Night is one of my favorite games of all time. In fact, I think I've beaten this game easily at least 25 times in my entire lifetime. And I know that sounds ridiculous or hyperbole, but I swear it's true. I've played this game since it was first released. I was, like a freshman in high school, I think. A friend let me borrow it, and I wasn't really too interested in it because I hadn't really played Castlevania since the Super Nintendo. And Castlevania wasn't my favorite franchise. I liked it, but it was just whatever. But my buddy, his name was Matt, he was very adamant that I should play Symphony of the Night. So he let me borrow it, and I played it, and it just absolutely blew me away. I remember playing it and be like, wow, this is just like Super Metroid. This is incredible. And so I beat it, and you gotta remember, I'm 14 or something like that. I'm 14 years old. This game is brand new. I finally beat it. I bring it back to my buddy, and I let him know, you were completely right. This was a fantastic game. Thanks for letting me borrow it. And he was just like, oh, that's awesome. What'd you think of the Upside Down Castle? And I was like, the Upside Down what? And I know that's a little spoilery, but this is a 20-something-year-old game. I mean, we all know about the Upside Down Castle at this point, right? And so, yeah, I didn't know about the Upside Down Castle. He looks at me like I'm crazy, and he hands the game back over to me and says, you need to figure this out. Of course, he gave me some guidance on what to do, but the thing was I didn't have the internet back then. The internet existed. I'm not that freaking old, but my family was really poor, and I didn't have a computer in my house, so of course I didn't have the internet. And obviously, smartphones weren't a thing yet. So I got some guidance from my buddy. I went back home. I played this game and did everything I had to do to actually like 100% complete it, or whatever the completion rate is. Anyway, I got to the Upside Down Castle and I completed the rest of the game, and it was just so phenomenal. I could not believe it. And so I probably beat Symphony of the Night like, I don't know, 5 more times that year or something. I just absolutely loved it. And since then, Symphony of the Night has been a staple, and I play it every single year around this time of year, because it's Halloween. Might as well throw in some Symphony of the Night, right? Anyway, I tell you all that because I want you to know that I absolutely love and adore this game, and I want you to understand why it's so hard for me to take a look at it through an objective lens. But I'm going to do my best, so here we go. As always, we start with the pros, and I have my first pro here is just Alucard. That's it, just Alucard is all I put. And I don't even need to elaborate on what that means. I mean, everyone's going to take a look at that and be like, oh yeah, Alucard, absolutely, that's a plus, move on. But I think it's absolutely worth talking about, just at least for a second. Alucard is just so badass. Like, he's a half vampire. They call him Dampiers, but I'm not going to call him Dampiers. And he just has so many cool things about him, like the way he turns around, the way like he jumps and his cape flows, the way he talks to death, the way he just like carries himself. Everything about Alucard is absolutely otherworldly and sweet. It's hard not to love the guy. And that brings me to my next pro, and that's that the game has a very strong opening. And I think everyone here knows the opening to Symphony of the Night. That opening dialogue between Dracula and Richter, we all have that like etched into our brains at this point. I used to make Mad Libs with my friends at lunch during high school. Yes, I'm that much of a dork. I'm not going to apologize anymore. And one of the Mad Libs that I created was the dialogue from this opening, and my friends just loved it. Anyway, yeah, that dialogue is super cheesy. It's super stupid, but I don't know, man. It's so fun. Could be what it said. Could be the voice acting itself. Just all of it just comes together. Everything like, what is a man? And he throws the glass away. And just how like Richter isn't taking any of Dracula's crap. And he's like, perhaps the same could be said of all religions. And then Richter's just like, shut up. Then you go into the fight, and it's the fight from Rondo of Blood, which is the game that none of us played back in that day. But it was cool to experience it because I suppose the devs were like, you know what? A lot of the Western audience, they haven't really played Rondo of Blood, so if we put in this ending here, it'll help contextualize things or bring them up to speed or something like that. So it was a smart move in that sense. But yeah, that opening is just so good. It's so iconic. Just because it sets the tone that this is a Castlevania game, but it's also going to be a little campy and a little cheesy. I hope you're down with that. And of course, everyone was down with that. It was so good. So we do that opening fight, we complete it, and then there's like a text scroll thing that happens. That's fine, whatever. Then the next thing we know, we're Alucard, and he's like running through the forest, and he jumps over the castle gate to get into Castlevania. I think that's Count Dracula's castle's name. I think it's literally called Castlevania. But anyway, you move forward with Alucard. You see this big, scary-looking wolf, and then you just like hit it once, and it just like howls and dies and explodes into flames. Like the precedent that this scene sets, that Alucard is a complete badass, and these wicked, evil-looking huge things, they don't even stand a chance to him. Man, that is trippy stuff, dude. And then you find death, and it all gets taken away from you, right? Just like any good Metroidvania would do. Yeah, but the fact that death even like talks to you and shows you some sort of respect, that just adds so much more to Alucard's clout. And so yeah, this entire opening, it just sets everything up just absolutely perfectly. It tells you, the backstory. It introduces you to Alucard in such a fantastic way, and then it takes away all your powers to really just, it's just kind of cool because it's like, hey, this is how powerful an Alucard is. Now we're going to take it away from you, and it's kind of like motivating. Like, you can get that powerful again, but you got to earn it. And it's just, what a fantastic way to start a game. But I do want to address the elephant in the room here. A lot of people really love this opening, and they should, because it's great. However, it's not entirely original. This is exactly how Wonder Boy and the Dragon's Trap starts. Symphony of the Night almost wholesale rips off everything that Wonder Boy did back in '89. So it was like, I don't know, a decade or so before, almost a decade, like 8 years or so. But yeah, straight up, this amazing opening, straight up ripped off from Wonder Boy on the Master System. Now, I don't think that anyone should be like, oh wow, we shouldn't like this opening anymore. No, that's not what I'm saying. I just want to give credit where credit's due, and Wonder Boy and the Dragon's Trap did it first, and I just think everyone should know that. Did Symphony of the Night do it better? Absolutely. And I love every second of Symphony's opening. All right, moving on. My next pro is the cheesy voice acting. I kind of already touched on that, talking about the opening, but yeah, that is something that is done throughout the entire game. You talk to Richter, you talk to Maria, you talk to the succubus. All of it is just kind of hammy. It's not the greatest voice acting. It's not terrible. And I actually like a lot of Alucard's delivery, especially Dracula. I think Dracula's delivery, especially during the final fight, I thought they did pretty well, actually. It was just really, like, the dialogue was kind of weird, and it was probably like a localization thing or something like that. But anyway, yeah, it's a bit cheesy, but I absolutely love it. The next pro I have is one that I don't think anyone would disagree with, is that the presentation for Symphony of the Night still holds up to this day. And I'm not going to do like a huge history lesson on it, but you know, everyone here is probably familiar with the time period in which Symphony of the Night came out. This is when a lot of companies were more focused on 3D games. And when Iga and his team pitched Symphony of the Night as a 2D game, they got some significant pushback. But it would appear that making this game 2D was absolutely the right call, because even to this day, man, it looks beautiful. It looks beautiful. It sounds beautiful. It's almost like it hasn't aged. Now, of course, it's aged a little, but not as much as, say, like, take a look at Castlevania 64, right? Like, all right, don't look at it. It hurts. But yes, Castlevania Symphony of the Night still looks great to this day. The enemies in Symphony of the Night are really awesome too. And I actually have a few things to say about the enemy design. I'll keep some of it for the cons, because I do believe they're not perfect, but a lot of the enemy designs in this game are just so good. And there's such a huge variety, which is actually part of the cons, but again, we'll get to that. But there's so many enemies in this game, and some of them you only see once. I feel like they really cared, you know what I mean? They really cared about the enemies, the enemy design. It just seems like there was so much love in this game. Like, you go to this one hallway, and there's this one enemy that you'll fight, and that's the only place you'll ever see them. And it even has its own, like, death animation. A lot of these enemies, they do have their own death animations. The developers, they really went all out with so many aspects of this game. It's so easy to do a death animation where, like, the enemy just, like, bursts into flames or just, like, disappears or whatever. But no, Symphony of the Night, you kill an enemy, sometimes, like, their head will fall off, or they'll, like, writhe in pain, or they'll do something. Maybe if they're armor and they'll just, like, fall apart or something like that. But it's so really awesome, but not nearly as awesome as the boss fights in this game. Symphony of the Night has some of the greatest bosses I've seen in a Metroidvania. And there are so many of them, and they're all designed so well. Maybe not every single one of them, but like a great majority of them they just look great. Beelzebub being a highlight, you know, Legion was really awesome. But just about every boss in Symphony of the Night is pretty dang memorable. Some of them can be pretty challenging, but not really. This is a pretty easy game, to be honest. At least when it comes to combat and the challenge that should typically come with combat. And holy crap, my next pro here is actually about combat. So, I mean, I swear I didn't make that transition. So, yeah, combat is great in this game. Absolutely fantastic. Controls are so well, and there's just so many things to do. Focusing on the controls, you got Alucard. He can jump in the air. He can strafe in the air when he jumps, which is something that the Belmonts pretty much never could do. At least not till Egovanias were created. There's attack animation cancels, so you can do more damage, like where you jump in the air and right before you land, you hit, and then you land and you can hit again, and then you can backdash and hit again. I love stuff like that. Overall, Alucard just feels absolutely great to handle. And then back to me saying that there's just so many things to do. It's just like, I talked about the fighting game control moves you can do, like Soul Steel and Dark Metamorphosis and stuff like that, as well as using sub-weapons and things. It's just, there's just so much, and even man, this brings us to my next point. I swear I swear I'm not making these transitions, but yeah, even some of the gear in the game have special properties and special moves that you can do if you do like certain like button combinations. For instance, like the shield rod. I think everyone knows the shield rod who's played this game and how absolutely freaking broken that is. But yes, the gear in this game is just so good. I mean, you got armor, you got weapons, you got shields, accessories. The devs really went all out when they wanted to add the RPG element to this game, which you know basically created the Vania part of Metroidvania, and that's what it is. Whenever you hear somebody talk about the Vania part Metroidvania, it's really just the light RPG elements. And yes, Wonder Boy and the Dragon's Trap did do this stuff as well, but Symphony of the Night really made it awesome. And what makes it awesome is that Symphony of the Night has many weapons. Like you take a look at like older Castlevania games and you got the whip, right? And even if you take a look at Wonder Boy and the Dragon's Trap, it's really just a sword. Well, in Symphony of the Night, you got a sword, you got daggers, you got all kinds of crap. And each comes with its own animation or its own like attack speed. And like I mentioned earlier, they could have special abilities that you can do too. Like if you get the actual Alucard sword, he like teleports behind and slashes you a couple times. And I can't remember the name of all the gear, but there's this one that I found. I'm pretty sure it was a sword, but you could like do like the Hadouken movement, like quarter circle from down to left or right or whatever. Hit attack, and it would like summon like skeletons to help you fight. And then randomly, it would summon an army of skeletons to help you fight. It's just, this game is just absolutely goofy. And I don't have that as a pro in my list here, but I think I actually love Castlevania games or Igavanias because of their goofiness. So yeah, this pro will be called Goofiness. Igavania games, they never take themselves too seriously. I mean, you got this, they have this atmosphere, and we'll talk about atmosphere, because especially when it comes to the cons, but they create this atmosphere, and it's serious in tone until it's not. Like, one of my favorite things that Iga's dev team has done to like kind of break the gothic tone in their game wasn't Bloodstained Symphony of the Night, when they give you like these squeaky shoes. Like, what's the point in that other than just to be stupid? And this really started with Symphony of the Night. I think there's like a shoe that you can equip in Symphony of the Night where it just makes you a little taller. It's just absolutely pointless, but just so funny. I don't know. I just love it. My next pro here has to do with design, like the map design. I really thought they did a great job at introducing players to what this Castlevania's map in this world was going to be like. So the map in Symphony of the Night isn't the biggest, but it was pretty big for the time and was relatively new. Like, yeah, we had maps in Dragon's Trap and especially in Super Metroid, right? But this is Castlevania; they've never done it before. And so there's this section that I think is absolutely brilliant. I don't really remember all the biomes names off the top of my head. I'm doing all this from memory, but it's like a long hallway, and there's like the eyeball floating in the background, which is just what a fantastic touch that is. And that's another really big pro to the design, is all the stuff they put in the background, all these Easter eggs. It's just like, man, you just fall in love. Anyway, you're going down this long hallway, right? And there's like those enemies that have like I don't know, like they have, they're like scorpions, they have a tail, and then like on top of the tail is like a woman that shoots fire or something at you. So anyway, you go down this long, pretty much boring hallway, but it goes the length of the entire map. And it's such a brilliant way to show players, hey, this is how big this world is going to be, at least from, a horizontal stance. And again, it was just such a brilliant way to set those expectations for players. And I see a lot of Metroidvanias doing stuff like this, not very often, but it really works. And I thought, Symphony of the Night doing it, they nailed it. And then I guess this brings me to my last pro. And again, there's so many more pros. In fact, I came up with a couple more as I was just going down this list. But just one of the last pros that I want to talk about today is exploration as a whole. And this will actually lead us into the cons as well, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. But yes, exploration in Symphony of the Night is pretty dang amazing. And I could say all the basic stuff about exploration, about how I like the biomes and moving around and just seeing all these different enemies and stuff like that. Yeah, that's all really awesome and rewarding. But I think what makes exploration so freaking fantastic in Symphony of the Night is that so much of it is optional. And I don't just mean all the stuff off from the critical path. Because for me, the game's critical path is getting up to Richter and defeating Richter. That's the basic ending. It's the bad ending. It's part of the critical path. There's more to it when you go down the true path, but we'll get to that. But yeah, if we're just going down the critical path for this game, so much is optional. And all this optional content really helps Symphony of the Night stick out, especially during its contemporaries back in 97 or whenever this game came out. Before Symphony of the Night, I had never played a game that had hid so much crap from you. And not only did they hide stuff from you, but it was good stuff they were hiding. It just absolutely blew my mind. And even if you take the true path, there's still a bunch of stuff that you could skip. And that just makes you want to find it so much more. And beyond that, exploration is just incredibly rewarding. Every time you find a new path, every time you find a new biome, every time you find new gear, you're pretty excited. Until you're not excited. And this brings us to the cons. And my first con here is that exploration becomes unrewarding eventually. And this is something that you see a lot especially in Igavania games. There's a lot of RNG in these games, and sometimes enemies will drop you something like pretty rare, like a weapon, and it's incredibly powerful, or any piece of gear for that matter. And you equip it, and sometimes that might be the best piece of gear you find for the rest of the game. And so you could be exploring, find this super secret area, do this really difficult challenge. Maybe it's platforming based, maybe it's combat, could be both. But anyway, you overcome this challenge, right? And then you find this super secret piece of gear, and it's trash. It's nothing compared to the RNG thing you found. And that happens a lot in Symphony of the Night, and like I said, in every Igavania. Just a lot of the things that you find just aren't as good as the thing that you have. And so yeah, you can find HP up, MP ups, and there's all kinds of things to find, and it is exciting to find new stuff. It is. But it's always a bummer to be like, oh, here's this sword that just is absolutely trash compared to this mace that I have. And it's like, ugh. But yeah, that's just a tiny gripe. A big gripe I have, and this is like, I'm not going to weigh this very heavily when it comes to putting Symphony of the Night on the tier list, but gosh, it's so annoying. And it's the game over screen. Anyone who's played Symphony of the Night, especially on the PlayStation 1 when I played it, every time you died, it took like a good a minute and a half, 2 minutes to get the game over screen and then reload your game. It was painful. And, maybe it was upgraded, because what was it called? I don't know. There's like the most recent Symphony of the Night that you can play will be like on that Requiem game. I can't remember it has Rondo and it has Symphony of the Night on it. I haven't played that. I've only ever played the PlayStation 1 version. And like I said, I've played the PlayStation 1 version 25 plus times. And that game over screen is still just etched into my brain, and I just absolutely hate it. But anyway, that's just a stupid nitpick. The next thing I have is the game's atmosphere. And I want to say this first. Overall, the game's atmosphere is absolutely fantastic. Like going into that church and then the music stopping, and you can sit down, and that thing will either it'll either stab you or cry. It's really weird. There's a lot of really cool, outrageous things that happen throughout this game. And the atmosphere is just it's cool, but it's just weird. And it's like, what are these biomes doing? They're all over the place. And I get it. Castlevania is supposed to be kind of like this. And when I say Castlevania, I mean the actual castle. It's supposed to be like this living being that shifts and turns into different things. Totally get it. Not that big of a deal there. But man, the music in this game is wacky. And I know I said earlier that I love the cheesiness in this game and the oddball humor that's going on and just the weird gear, right? Like there's some goofiness and I absolutely love it. But for some reason, it doesn't work for me when it comes to the music. And this game has some banger music. I'm not saying that all the music's terrible. No, there's like just a few, like maybe 2 places where you're just like, what is going on with this music? One's the Coliseum. The Coliseum has like this, like this jazz music. I don't even know. It's like upbeat and it's very wrong. It feels wrong. I like the track. It's a good track, but it doesn't feel like it should be in a Castlevania game or in a Coliseum or anything like that. And I know there's probably other tracks that I just didn't like. I can't think of them off the top of my head. I just know that Coliseum music was so salient because it was so bad. I know there's like when you go to the underground caverns, this music plays, and I personally don't like it. I think it's too dreamlike. It's good. It's a good track, but it didn't work for me when it came to establishing the atmosphere in Castlevania. Maybe it worked for you, not a big deal, but I will die on the hill that Coliseum music is too wacky. My next con has to do with the narrative. I don't want to harp on it too much because the narrative, by and large, is pretty freaking good in my opinion. You're Alucard. You go and you have to figure out why Dracula's castle is back. It shouldn't be back yet. You find out that Richter's there and he's actually the master of this castle, and you gotta figure that mystery out. That's actually really cool. Especially when I was a kid, I looked at it and I was like, wow, the Belmont's the bad guy? This is awesome. But much like Super Metroid, I think a lot of that narrative gets lost in the sauce, right? Especially when it comes to the stakes. I get it. Dracula's back and he's the master of evil and he's going to destroy mankind, stuff like that. Yeah, I get the stakes in that. And it's cool that it's like, it's always there. It's ever present, but it's like not at the same time. I get lost in the exploration, the wacky music, the goofy gear, stuff like that. And every once in a while Maria will come up and talk to you, but it's never anything substantial, but it does keep things moving. But there's a real disconnect from the narrative and the game, especially when you get to the Upside Down Castle. Like once you get to the Upside Down Castle, there's no new information given to you. Like it's just, you got to replay the game again and nothing, there's no revelations, there's nothing. It's just you playing the game, which is fine. A lot of people probably love that. And that's why I don't think this should be weighed very heavily on where I put Symphony of the Night on this tier list. But just, I guess personally, I would love to have seen more of the narrative and more of the stakes and things like that. But again, yeah, it does a good job, especially when it brings in the succubus and it shows Lisa and the succubus is messing with Alucard. It does have a narrative and it does do a good job. I just wanted more. Okay, moving away from that, back to enemy designs. And I praise the enemy designs because there's a lot of enemies. They're very detailed, done really well. But there's a couple of things that I didn't like about the designs. One, a lot of them are recycled, but we wouldn't have known this as kids. So again, I'm not weighing this too heavily, but yeah, a lot of the sprites and a lot of the enemies were recycled from Rondo of Blood. Now, when I say a lot, I can't give you the exact number, but there were a few. How's that? There were a few that I recognized from Rondo of Blood. But the game does have a lot of original enemies. I don't want to take away from it, but I just so much of it was actually recycled. And the reason I harp on it a little bit is because like the enemies in this game, they have like zero cohesion. I love the enemies, but it's just like what is happening? We have Greek mythology, we have Egyptian mythology, we have all kinds of these mythologies like kind of converging into this castle for some reason. It just didn't make a whole lot of sense. And I can hear some people saying, well, actually, what's happening? I'm not trying. Actually, no, that's not how I view EP. I'm sorry. But no, I can hear people saying, well, Dracula has the power of dominance, right? And so any dark creature has to adhere or listen to Dracula because he's their master. That's just his superpower or whatever, the power of dominance. To which I say, yes, I agree with that. However, the power of dominance, I believe the power of dominance was not introduced until Aria of Sorrow, or Area of Sorrow. I never can know how to say that one. The one with Soma Cruz. Aria of Sorrow. I'm going to say Aria of Sorrow. So the power of dominance was introduced in Aria of Sorrow, and yeah, I do believe it explains why the enemies are all over the place in Symphony of the Night, but that game didn't come out till much later, so it just seemed a little weird to see all these like enemies not making really any sense, right? And some of the best Metroidvanias, their enemies, they do kind of make sense, if you get what I'm saying. Like, say, like, Ender Lilies, right? Ender Lilies is full of, like, zombies and decrepit things and, blah, 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 this, that, and the other thing, right? They're all, like, really gross, and you look at an enemy and you're like, yeah, I can see why this enemy is here, and this is, like, this enemy. It all just kind of, like, creates this atmosphere, this cohesion that I absolutely love. But then you take a look at a lot of Igavanias, Symphony of the Night, or especially Bloodstained. Like, Bloodstained has this lady that shoots fire from an electric guitar. That's amazing, but it's kind of goofy. And again, if you like that, perfect. I mean, I kind of like it, but I also prefer cohesion in my enemy designs. And that really brings me to the end of my cons. I'm looking at my last con here, and it has to do with Wonder Boy and the Dragon's Trap. I think I've already harped on that a little bit. Just, I want to give Wonder Boy the credit that it deserves, because it basically created that a strong opening that Symphony of the Night kind of ripped off. And Wonder Boy added so much to the Metroidvania genre, way before that word even existed, and way before even Super Metroid or Symphony of the Night. Okay, and now we've reached spoilers section. So we are in spoilers territory. Again, this is an old game, so maybe this isn't that big of a deal, but this is something that I want to start doing moving forward. That way I don't spoil things for people. So my first thing here is the true path, to get to the actual true ending of Symphony of the Night. I have a pro and a con for it. My pro is that it is well hidden, and it's an interesting journey. You have to find the 2 rings, equip them, go to the clock tower, talk to Maria in this hidden room, and then Maria gives you the holy glasses. You take the holy glasses, you equip those, and then you go and fight Richter at the top of the castle, but then you see the little orb above his head. You destroy that, which reveals Shaft, and then Shaft leaves, and then there's an upside down castle for whatever reason. I have no idea. And then from there, you go to the upside down castle. You have to find the 5 or 6, I think it's 5 parts of Dracula, which I guess is reminiscent to Simon's Quest. And you find those 5 pieces, then Dracula's final room opens, you fight Shaft, fight Dracula, whatever. Really cool, really interesting. I think my favorite part of that entire journey is getting the Spike Buster armor, or the Spike Breaker armor, whatever it's called. What a really awesome piece of equipment. This game really went all out with its oddities and creativeness. To get one of the rings, you just have to defeat the succubus, which is not very difficult. But then the other one, the other ring, you have to do all kinds of stuff, right? It's like it's a journey in and of itself. You got to fight these bosses. You got to get the Echo of the Bat, and then you got to use that Echo of the Bat in this dark area so you don't get killed by the spikes. Then you find the Spike Breaker armor. Then you got to find the place where you got to equip the armor so that you can go through the door and you can find the second ring, right? Then you got to figure out where to put those two rings. And they give you a clue, the rings do. But anyway, yeah, that's really, really awesome. Fantastic little journey there. My only issue with the True Path is that the creative logic is just busted. None of it makes sense. And that's okay, it's a video game, I can hear people saying. But my only concern is Maria. She's just like chilling in that secret room where you need the two rings to enter. How did she even get in there? She's just Maria. I'm Alucard. I should be able to turn in the mist and just like seep in some places, right? But no, I had to find two rings, but she can get in like without a hassle. And maybe she had a hassle, I don't know. But the point is, it's just kind of stupid that your reward for finding the two rings is to see Maria, who you've seen throughout the castle anyways, and she's in this super secret area that you had to like struggle to figure out how to get to, and then she's just waiting for you there. Like, I don't know, it's just kind of dumb. It's not the biggest deal, it really isn't, but I always love it when the true path to getting to the ending is cohesive and it makes sense, and they use creative logic in fascinating ways. And Symphony of the Night really doesn't use its creative logic to the best of its abilities. Now again, I enjoyed it and it was a lot of fun, and this was the first time that a Metroidvania had alternate endings, so you give it some grace. But much like Super Metroid, I'm taking a look at it through a modern lens. And I guess my last bit here, I don't know why I put this in the spoiler section, but I did. I guess it technically is a spoiler. It's an upside down castle, right? Everyone knows about it, so I'm sorry if I talked about it before the spoiler section, but it's just, I find the upside down castle to be a con, and not just because it exists, because I think it existing and prolonging the game is absolutely awesome. It's iconic. It is just straight up cool. It blows your mind when you first see it. But I have to say, when I replay this game, I always dread the upside down castle. It is just not fun to navigate. It's just like I said, there's no new revelations. It just feels like it was tacked on. And maybe it was. And I don't want to be too harsh on it. I just wanted to get it out there. It's like, yeah, I love the upside down castle, but it is probably my least favorite part of the game. And that sucks because that's probably the last 50% of the game, or the last 25% of the game, however you want to look at it. It just doesn't really add much to the game because you're literally retreading old ground. It's just upside down now. And it's not very fun to navigate because it wasn't designed to be like the ceilings, they weren't designed to be walked on. And yes, you can fly now as the bat, and you have the super jump, hopefully, and you can be the mist and fly around all over the place. But all that can still just be kind of a hassle. I don't know. Take it for what it is. I just the upside down castle, really cool concept, but it really is my least favorite part of the game. All right, I think I'm going to shut up now. I think I've said enough about Symphony of the Night. All that's left is where would I place it on the tier list. This actually isn't very difficult. I think it's A tier for me, and I'm going to put it above Super Metroid. Yeah, I think that's a good spot for it. And I don't know how you all watching this feel, and you're like, wow, you really think Astalon and Ender Lilies is better than Symphony of the Night and Super Metroid? And the simple answer to that is yes. Those games are amazing, and I really feel like I should probably do a video on Astalon soon, because God, man, that game is so very good. But anyway, back to Symphony of the Night. I do prefer Symphony of the Night over Super Metroid. Matter of fact, I prefer Symphony of the Night over a lot of these games, especially because it has the Vania in it. I'm going to have preference over any Metroidvania that leans closer to the Vania side than it does Metroid. I just really like how these games have those RPG elements, and the progression just always feels better for me. Not only that, but Symphony of the Night did some really great firsts for the series. And though a lot of what's attributed to Symphony of the Night actually should go to Wonder Boy and the Dragon's Trap, Symphony of the Night is a far better game than Dragon's Trap. Let's be real. And Symphony of the Night is actually really close to being an S tier for me, but it's just the fact that the true path, or that journey for the true path, even though it is memorable and cool, the creative logic isn't there. And that, same thing with Astalon, like the creative logic behind that one. 100%ing a map in order to get the true ending in Astalon is absolutely stupid. Like, you get the homunculus, that should do. Anyway, I'm going on a tangent. But yeah, Castlevania Symphony of the Night, its creative logic isn't the best when it comes to getting its true path. And I don't know, it's because I played the game so damn much, but the upside down castle is just not my favorite. And that is just a large chunk of the game. Just, if they would have designed the upside down castle to be a little bit more maneuverable and didn't require me to constantly be turning to the bat or mist or whatever to get around, then it wouldn't be that bad. And the other things, the other reason why I don't think Castlevania Symphony of the Night is S tier is just, I don't feel like its exploration is as rewarding as other games. At least the games that I have that are higher on this list. Again, the exploration in Symphony of the Night is really, really good, especially for the time when it was brand new. But compared to its contemporaries, it just isn't as good as them. And it has that Iconoclasts curse where it's just so many of the items in the game are pointless at very early in the game. There's just so many weapons and so much armor that you're just like, oh, well, I already have stronger versions of these things. This just feels pointless to search for them. Anyway, I think I've rambled enough. Symphony of the Night, high A tier, very, very fantastic. I know people will say that Symphony of the Night and Super Metroid are overrated. I don't necessarily agree with that. I do believe there are much better Metroidvanias than them, but I still think they're incredibly good. Anyway, yeah, so there we go. We got Super Metroid and we got Castlevania Symphony of the Night officially on this list as A tier. High A tier, I would imagine. And this finally brings us to the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope I didn't crush too many people's feelings when it comes to placing Castlevania Symphony of the Night and Super Metroid on the list. I really do love those games, and A tier is huge. I mean, there's so many Metroidvanias out there, and the fact that these games are so old yet still so good, especially in my opinion, I think that means something. What do you guys think of their placement? Am I wrong? Am I right? Am I dumb? Am I super brilliant? Probably not that last one, but feel free to let me know in the comments what you think. Again, I do make amendments based off of feedback because I do these tier lists kind of like off the top of my head. I'm bound to miss something. It just happens. And so if I missed a certain aspect that you feel should be considered when talking about these games, you got to let me know. I'm more than happy to address it and to amend anything that I have on here because I really am trying to make the definitive Metroidvania list. Anyway, that's it for today. Thank you so much for listening to all of this. I'm sure it's going to be a huge episode. Leave a like and a comment, subscribe if you haven't yet, and I will see you all next month. Later.